In 1962, a US military transport plane carrying 93 soldiers took off from Guam and was never seen again. No crash site, no distress signal, just gone. What really happened to Flight 739? A tragic accident? A government cover-up? Or something even stranger? In the decades since, the families of those lost have been denied not just closure, but even basic recognition. Their loved ones' names are absent from the Vietnam Memorial Wall, their mission purpose buried in classified files, their very existence seemingly an inconvenience to the official narrative of the Vietnam War. Today, we dive into one of the Cold War's most disturbing unsolved mysteries, a case that raises uncomfortable questions about what our government tells us, what it hides from us, and whether some truths are deliberately buried at sea. To understand the mystery of Flight 739, we need to start with what we know for certain, the documented facts of its final journey. It was March 14, 1962. The Cold War was at its height. The Cuban Missile Crisis was just months away. And in Vietnam, what Americans still called a conflict was rapidly escalating toward what would become America's longest war. On that day, a Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation operated by the Flying Tiger Line, a military charter airline, departed Travis Air Force Base in California. Its mission was to transport a group of highly specialized soldiers to Saigon, South Vietnam. On board were 93 U.S. Army Rangers and communication specialists, along with 11 civilian crew members. Many of the soldiers were electronics experts, specialists in radar and radio communications. This would later become a crucial detail in the mystery surrounding their disappearance. The flight plan was straightforward, if lengthy. From California to Hawaii, then to Wake Island, on to Guam, and finally to Clark Air Base in the Philippines, before reaching its final destination of Saigon. The first 3 legs of the journey proceeded without incident. On March 16th, Flight 739 departed Guam's Anderson Air Force Base at 12:57 a.m. local time. Weather conditions were reported as excellent. Calm seas, clear visibility, with a quarter moon illuminating the night sky. The flight was scheduled to arrive at Clark Air Base approximately 6 hours later. The last known communication with the aircraft came at 1:30 a.m. when the pilot, Captain Robert Wish, routinely reported his position to Guam International Flight Service Station. The plane was flying at 18,000 feet, and everything appeared normal. Captain Wish made no mention of mechanical issues, unusual weather, or any other concerns. Then, silence. The aircraft never arrived at Clark Air Base. It never sent a distress signal. It simply vanished somewhere over the western Pacific Ocean, in an area often referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of the Pacific. This is where the documented facts end and where the mystery and the theories begin. When Flight 739 failed to arrive at Clark Air Base, the military response was swift and massive. What followed was, at that time, one of the largest air-sea rescue operations in the history of the Pacific. The search area was immense, covering approximately 144,000 square miles of open ocean, an area larger than the state of Montana. The US military deployed 48 aircraft and 8 surface vessels. More than 1,300 people participated in the search, which lasted for 8 days and cost millions of dollars. Their task was nearly impossible. The ocean in that region reaches depths of over 36,000 feet, deeper than Mount Everest is tall. If the aircraft had gone down intact, it could have sunk to depths beyond the reach of recovery technology at that time. Adding to the mystery was a report from the crew of a Liberian tanker, the SS T.L. Lenzen. About 90 minutes after Flight 739's last radio contact, the tanker's crew observed what they described as a midair explosion in the night sky, with a bright flash followed by 2 dull red flashes as the material fell toward the ocean. This observation came from about 500 miles west of Guam, directly in the path that Flight 739 would have been following. When search teams reached the location where the explosion was reportedly seen, they found nothing. No floating debris, no oil slick, no bodies. Nothing to indicate that a massive aircraft carrying 104 people had crashed there just hours earlier. After 8 days of intensive searching, the Civil Aeronautics Board issued its official finding. The board is unable to determine the probable cause of this accident from the evidence now available. This lack of conclusion is extraordinarily rare in aviation disasters. Almost always, investigators can determine what happened to a missing aircraft, even if the wreckage is never recovered. Radar data, floating debris, oil slicks, or seats and bodies that float to the surface provide clues. In the case of Flight 739, there was simply nothing to find. This absence of evidence has fueled decades of speculation. How could a four-engine aircraft measuring 116 feet long with a wingspan of 123 feet disappear without leaving a single trace? Even if the aircraft had exploded mid-air, as the tanker crew's report suggested, there should have been thousands of pieces of floating debris scattered across miles of ocean. Nature abhors a vacuum, and human minds abhor unexplained mysteries. In the absence of concrete answers about Flight 739, theories have multiplied over the decades, ranging from the plausible to the fantastical. The first and perhaps most persistent theory is that Flight 739 was deliberately shot down, either by Soviet forces or North Vietnamese operatives, and that the US government covered it up to prevent escalation of tensions during a particularly dangerous period of the Cold War. This theory gained traction because of the specialized nature of the troops on board. Many were communications experts being sent to Vietnam at a time when the US was rapidly expanding its covert operations there. Their mission was classified, adding another layer of secrecy and suspicion. Supporting this theory are reports from the families of some soldiers who claim they received strange phone calls before the flight. Several family members reported that their loved ones seemed unusually nervous about the mission, with one soldier allegedly telling his wife, "If this plane disappears, it won't be an accident." Another soldier reportedly called his sister the night before departure and cryptically stated, "I can't tell you where I'm going, but if anything happens to me, don't believe what they tell you." Could these soldiers have known something about the dangerous nature of their mission? Were they aware of threats that weren't shared with the public? Adding to suspicions is the fact that another Flying Tiger Line flight, a cargo plane following a similar route on the same day, experienced an attempted hijacking. A crewman on that flight tackled a man who tried to enter the cockpit armed with a gun and hand grenades. The military never publicly connected the two incidents, but the timing is certainly suspicious. The second major theory involves the CIA and covert operations. Some researchers believe Flight 739 wasn't carrying ordinary soldiers, but was instead transporting CIA operatives or special forces for a secret mission in Southeast Asia. Declassified documents have since revealed that by 1962, the CIA was already deeply involved in operations throughout Southeast Asia, including Laos and Vietnam. The agency was establishing networks of spies, conducting sabotage operations, and training local resistance fighters, all activities that would have required the kind of communication specialists who were on Flight 739. If the flight was part of a covert operation, would the US government acknowledge its loss, or would the mission and the fate of those involved be classified and effectively erased from public records? Perhaps the most unusual theory connects Flight 739 to what some call the Pacific Bermuda Triangle, a region of the Western Pacific Ocean where several aircraft and ships have mysteriously disappeared over the decades. Some researchers point to unusual electromagnetic anomalies in the region, potentially caused by underwater geological features or military experiments. Others suggest more exotic explanations, involving extraterrestrial activity or interdimensional portals. Whatever happened to Flight 739, it happened quickly, completely, and without leaving a trace, qualities that defy typical aircraft disasters and fuel speculation about forces beyond our understanding. Before we continue exploring the human side of this mysterious disappearance and the decades-long fight for recognition, I'd like to ask for your support. If you're finding this video valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more of these forgotten historical mysteries to light. Thanks to all who do. Now, let's return to Flight 739 and the families who still search for answers. Behind every mystery are real people whose lives are forever altered by unanswered questions. For the families of those lost on Flight 739, the disappearance didn't end when the official search was called off. It became a wound that has never healed, made worse by the government's reluctance to fully acknowledge their sacrifice. Donna Ellis was just 5 years old when her father, Staff Sergeant Melvin Lewis Hatt, boarded Flight 739. Decades later, she still remembers the day the military officers came to her home to inform her mother that her husband was missing. "They gave my mom 2 options," Ellis recalls. "Either my dad's missing or he's dead, and if she took the missing option, she wouldn't get any benefits, so she had to accept that he was dead without any proof." This pattern repeated across America, as families of the missing soldiers were forced to accept death benefits without evidence of death, closure, or even clear information about what their loved ones had been doing when they disappeared. Making matters worse, the Department of Defense classified the soldiers' mission as routine, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. This classification had profound consequences for how these men would be remembered. or rather, forgotten by their country. Because they technically weren't killed in a combat zone, the names of the 93 soldiers lost on Flight 739 have never been added to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. Their mission, whatever it truly was, has been relegated to a footnote in the history of the Vietnam War. For decades, the families of those lost have fought for recognition. Jennifer Kirk, whose uncle was on the flight, has spent years researching what happened. These men should be honored for their sacrifice, she says. They were going to Vietnam on orders from their country. Why should it matter whether they died over the Pacific or in Vietnam itself? This technicality has felt like a second betrayal to many families. Not only did they lose their loved ones under mysterious circumstances, but they've had to fight for decades to have that sacrifice officially recognized. In 2021, nearly 60 years after the disappearance, a significant milestone was finally reached. A private memorial was dedicated in Columbia Falls, Maine, specifically honoring those lost on Flight 739. Funded by Muriel Worcester, the founder of Wreaths Across America, the memorial provides the first official recognition of the missing soldiers and crew. At the dedication ceremony, family members from across the country gathered, many meeting each other for the first time. Some brought photographs, letters, and personal effects of their lost loved ones, creating an impromptu museum of lives interrupted. For many attendees, the memorial provided a degree of closure, even without answers. As one family member put it, finally, someone is saying that they existed, that they mattered, that their loss meant something. But questions still remain. Why has the government been so reluctant to acknowledge these soldiers? What were they really going to do in Vietnam? And most importantly, what really happened to them over the Pacific Ocean on that clear night in March 1962? 60 years after Flight 739 vanished, are we any closer to knowing what really happened? The answer is complicated. On one hand, the fundamental mystery remains unsolved. No wreckage has ever been found. The flight data recorder, which might have provided crucial information about the final moments of the flight, has never been recovered. Without physical evidence, all theories about the aircraft's fate remain speculative. On the other hand, the passage of time has allowed for the declassification of some documents relating to military and intelligence operations during that period. We now know more about what was happening in Southeast Asia in 1962 than was publicly acknowledged at the time. We know, for instance, that the US was already deeply involved in covert operations in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, years before the official escalation of the Vietnam War. We know that communication specialists, like many of those on Flight 739, were crucial to these operations, establishing networks that would be used throughout the conflict. In 2010, the Department of Defense released a brief statement acknowledging that the soldiers on Flight 739 were on their way to support US operations in South Vietnam during a very critical time. This vague statement, while offering little concrete information, represents a shift from the earlier position that they were simply on a routine transport mission. Some researchers believe the answer lies in still classified files. Under the 50-year rule for declassification, many documents from 1962 should now be available. However, materials related to intelligence operations can remain classified indefinitely, particularly if they involve sensitive methods, sources, or operations. The most plausible explanation remains a catastrophic in-flight explosion, whether from mechanical failure, sabotage, or external attack. The observation from the SSTL Lenzen of an explosion in the right area at approximately the right time supports this theory. If the aircraft exploded at high altitude, the debris could have been scattered across a vast area of ocean, with much of it sinking quickly. Add to this the challenges of searching a massive area of open ocean in 1962, and it becomes more understandable why no wreckage was found. Yet questions persist. Why was there no distress call? Modern aircraft don't simply explode without warning. There are usually system failures that would prompt the crew to radio for help. Why was there no floating debris at all? Even in cases of mid-air disintegration, some materials typically remain buoyant. And most troublingly, if this was simply a tragic accident, why has the government been so reluctant to recognize these soldiers' sacrifice by adding their names to the Vietnam Memorial? These unanswered questions keep the mystery alive. For some family members, answers may never come. For others, the hope remains that someday, someone will step forward with information that has been kept secret all these years. As technology advances, there's also the possibility that the wreckage could someday be located. Modern deep-sea exploration capabilities far exceed what was available in 1962. If the approximate location of the crash could be determined, a targeted search might finally locate the remains of Flight 739, thousands of feet below the Pacific's surface. Until then, the disappearance of Flight 739 remains one of the most perplexing mysteries of the Cold War era, a reminder that even in our modern age of surveillance and connectivity, it's still possible for 104 people to vanish without a trace. The story of Flight 739 is more than just a fascinating mystery. It's a reminder of the human cost of secrecy and the painful legacy of unanswered questions. For the families of the 93 soldiers and 11 crew members who vanished that night, the mystery isn't an intellectual puzzle. It's a wound that has never healed. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of the Flight 739 mystery is what it suggests about how easily people can disappear, how a massive aircraft carrying 104 souls can vanish without leaving so much as a floating seat cushion behind. In an age of constant surveillance and connectivity, the idea that something so large could disappear so completely challenges our sense of security and control. As time passes, the likelihood of finding definitive answers diminishes. Those who might have known the truth, military officials, intelligence officers, government leaders from that era, are largely gone now. Documents may remain classified indefinitely. The wreckage, if it exists, lies in one of the deepest parts of the Pacific Ocean. Yet the mystery endures and continues to fascinate those of us who are drawn to the unexplained, to the gaps in our understanding of the world. Perhaps someday, through new technology, declassified documents, or the courage of someone willing to speak after decades of silence, we'll learn what really happened to Flight 739. Until then, it remains one of the most compelling unsolved mysteries of the Cold War, a reminder that sometimes the truth really is stranger than fiction. What do you think happened to Flight 739? Was it a tragic accident, a deliberate attack, or something even more mysterious? Share your theories in the comments below. Thank you for joining us on Nefarious History. If you found this exploration of one of the Cold War's most baffling mysteries fascinating, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every week, we delve into the forgotten stories and unsolved mysteries that shaped our world.